I think also a second issue that I've discussed is what is good research, what is good pedagogy, how can we make sure that we do good research and good teaching. And thought leadership, I think, is the key when it comes to research. That's really what we're looking at, not necessarily minute hypothesis tests coming out from the silo after 3 years and say this is it or that. What really matters is good thoughts, new thoughts, thought leadership, and to bring that into the classroom. I think one of the reasons why the classes are so boring, not in your schools, but in many schools, is that there's just nothing new. It's all blah, blah. And, of course, that's not good enough today. So if you think about the future, I don't think that's going to stick anymore. And, of course, these two risks are interrelated, that we do irrelevant research and we do irrelevant teaching. Sadly, some schools fall into that category, not if they're Equus accredited, but you agree with that, yeah? Okay, very good, thank you. Still something to think about. And the third thing is that our client, the global firm, we all know that the firms are becoming more global, and we as business schools have to react to that. I see in Norway, for instance, the interesting companies are global. And that means they are really after action learning. They're not after sending their students back to school for months, but action learning on the job, more lifelong learning. You know, people are simply too bright and too fast to take an MBA. We don't like that, but that's the truth. But people then need learning on the job in addition to their bachelor's degree. And more lifelong learning. So these are things I've already talked about. Let me speculate about a little bit more. We have the Bologna, more Master of Science, and of course the MBA is under siege. In my opinion, the issue is not so much that. The issue is who has the time to spend 5 years in school. I think that many people, many of the brightest, will leave school before they take a master and then move on and do business and come back for shorter programs later on. I think that's the issue which is not being discussed in the Bologna thing. Talents, I mean, people who are slow take master's degrees, including MBAs. But fast people don't have time for that. Sorry about that. Oof, no, I'm in deep trouble. And we see, unfortunately, some evidence on that. We know that there's an undergraduate steady demand. In my opinion, the undergraduate demand, sorry about this, but this is something we have to discuss. The undergraduate is steady, but perhaps growing some. I think that's a function of the population on this globe. It will grow some. It certainly will grow in Asia, the undergraduate. We know that the GMAT testing activities is down, slightly up the last year, but it has really gone rather dramatically over the last few years. So we understand then that if, at least as an indicator for the MBA, this doesn't look too good. And the doctoral program, we all also know that it's very expensive. Not only money, but time. I mean, we all know how enormous amount of time it takes to have a bad doctoral student. You don't have any, but I've had many. And it's very, very resource-consuming to have a bad doctoral student. And so I think, frankly, whether we like it or not, that the real significant growth areas seem to be in executive education. I think you know that I'm biased here. I can see some reactions. But if you really look at the segmentation of our business, I think one can make a strong argument for that. And, of course, the EMBA is very central in that. That's a very attractive degree. So I would think that the future of business schools, when we come back together 5 years from now, I think many of these issues will be obvious, but I'm predicting that we have to look much more carefully at the market and to ask ourselves, are we segmenting our activities right? Everybody seems to be very enamored with MBAs now. I'm not so sure that that's necessarily the only way forward. So my conclusion is that I think we need to focus heavily on research, practical propositions, relevant research, thought leadership. And I think we must try to attract good practitioners to be involved, to come forward with the best from practice, so that we have that symbiosis between good research and good teaching, that the two meet each other, they interface with each other. And in my opinion, that's another reason why lifelong learning is so interesting. What can we learn from a green undergraduate? I remember when I was professor at MIT, I taught some undergraduates, and I taught strategy and said, strategy means choice. All right? All of us know that that's a fairly tough question, isn't it? And the undergraduate said, oh my God, Peter, what a stupid guy he is. How can he say such a naive thing? You see what I'm saying? The whole issue of an experience-based is very, very important to stimulate us to learn further. So lifelong learning is attractive from that point of view too. And in other words, to be good at that, we must be comfortable in networks, not hierarchies. That's another issue that we probably want to debate, and more action-oriented. Of course, that means that our schools are probably likely to be more simple than before, less bureaucratic, less departments. Sadly, we must rethink probably and be willing to do that. Some of us may not be able to do it. But I do think that this can be done. And I'm very encouraged by the debate I'm seeing going on in many instances now, having to do with trying to find better ways to run our schools. So, Tom, you said that we should have time for a little bit of Q&A. So I think we have 5 minutes for that. Huh? Thanks.